Hello friends and welcome to my new video. Today I won't be talking about some of my favorite cinema, which I usually do in my videos, but in fact today I will be talking about some of my favorite books on Hindi cinema and some of its famous personalities. Of late, maybe in the last 10 or 12 years, a huge number of books have been written on about Bollywood and its famous personalities. And as it most often happens when quantity takes over, somewhere down the line quality is compromised. Personally, I feel a majority of the books that come out on Hindi cinema are really not worth reading a second time. So, the books I've chosen today are huge favorites with me because I think they are well researched, thorough, in depth books on the topic that they're talking about. And I'd like to share them with you today. The first book is a book by Avijit Ghosh called 40 Retakes. And it's a book about 40 movies which the author feels have not been celebrated enough, or perhaps have been missed out by a large number of Hindi movie fans, and why they should be revisited. It's quite a comprehensive list, and the era that this book covers is a huge era. There are entries from the 50s and entries of the 21st century as well. So there are a lot of movies which most of us have missed out. In fact, I, after having read this book, discovered at least 8 or 9 movies which I had heard about but never really bothered to see. But after having read Avijit Ghosh's description and write-ups on those movies, I was intrigued enough to hunt for those movies and watch them. I think it's a very well written book, and it tackles a subject which is quite dear to me. Movies that have been ignored or that have sort of gotten lost in the sands of time. This book helped me discover quite a few movies, and I'm sure if you give this book a read, you'll want to discover most of the movies that he's mentioned in this book. It's a very good book. It's a very, very good book. I think it's still available. I got it from Amazon India, and I think it's still available there. A definite read, this one. The next book, it's written by a dear friend of mine, so it's hard to be a little. It's hard to be objective about this book, but I will still be objective. It's a book called R.D. Burman, The Man, the Music, and it's been written by Anirudh Bhattacharya and Balaji Vittal, both of whom are friends of mine. But that apart, I think this is the most comprehensive book on R.D. Burman. R.D. Burman, as as we're discovering, as we're realizing, is growing in worth, growing in stature with every year since his death. Since 1994, today into 2021, 27 years after his death, I think R.D. Burman has reached absolutely a mythical. He's attained that cult status, and he's attained I think a much greater fan following now than what he had towards the fag end of his career. So to write a book about R.D. without without just elevating him even further is a challenging task to do, and I think both Anirudh Bhattacharya and Balaji Vittal have done a fabulous job. It's a very objective analysis of his music. It's solidly based on facts and not on hearsay and not on conjunctions and assumptions and presumptions. And it doesn't only eulogize R.D. Burman. There are a lot of his shortcomings and his failures, which have also been mentioned very, very candidly in this book. But to me, I mean, there are, just as there are so many books on Bollywood these days, there are also quite a few books on R.D. Burman. But I think this is the most definitive book if you want to know about the man and the music of R.D. Burman. This is the only book you should be reading. It's a wonderful, wonderful read. Fascinating. The next book that I want to talk about actually came across as a surprise. It's a book on Parveen Babi by Karishma Upadhyay. And I was very intrigued when I saw this book on Amazon, and I decided to pick up a copy for myself without even reading the reviews or anything, simply because despite being such a huge fan of Hindi cinema of the 70s, I knew so little about Parveen Babi. And I thought this book would give me an opportunity to learn a little more. And after I picked up the book, it was so riveting, it was so gripping, I finished the book in 2 readings over 2 nights. It's a fabulously written book, very in-depth. It's heartbreaking to read, actually. There were so many things I didn't know about Parveen Babi till I read this book. So it was very heartbreaking at one level, and yet so informative and so fascinating at the same time. If I didn't know this was a true story, this would almost be like a movie. Such was her life, and such is this book written. It is written beautifully by Karishma Upadhyay. Do read it to know more about Parveen Babi. It's one of the better books in Hindi cinema. The next book, again, is a huge favorite. The first time I read, I think it was in an India Today article, I read that this book was coming out, and I was so thrilled because it's a book on some of my favorite filmmakers of Hindi cinema, the Ramsay brothers, the names synonymous with horror in Hindi cinema, the Ramsay brothers, and the book is called Don't Disturb the Dead. It's written by Soumya Dasgupta, and I was so happy when this book came out because, as I said, I'm a huge Ramsay brothers fan, and I think they created this genre in Hindi cinema of horror, and it was their brand of horror, which today is perhaps laughed at and ridiculed or whatever. But personally, I absolutely loved their movies, and I was so happy that finally someone had given them the recognition they so richly deserve. And this book is a wonderful source of information for almost everything that you wanted to know about the Ramsay brothers, of how they started, how they got into movie making, how they made each of their movies. There is an in-depth analysis and discussion about each of their movies, each of the brothers, the father also, F.U. Ramsay. And it's a wonderful read. It's an absolutely wonderful read. And what I really like about this book is at no point in time does Dasgupta try and elevate the Ramsays as some brilliant filmmakers or some classic movie makers. Nothing. He's very real. He's very real about their cinematic capabilities, about their abilities, about what kind of a target audience they catered to, what were their limitations as artists, as filmmakers, as creators of cinema. But there is so much of passion, there is so much of genuine, heartfelt emotions in this book, which comes across when you read it. It's wonderful, and for a fan like me, this was like godsend. I was waiting that will someone ever give the Ramsay brothers the recognition they so richly deserve, and I'm so glad that they got it through this wonderful book Don't Disturb the Dead by Soumya Dasgupta. It's absolutely fascinating. You must read this book. The last book again that I want to talk about in today's video is again, when I chanced upon this book, I really couldn't believe my eyes, because if I had to choose a topic, a favorite topic of mine, it would be this: The Wild World of 1970s Indian Action Cinema. Now that is my favorite part of Hindi cinema, the 1970s, the action movies of 1970s. And this book, called The Funky Bollywood, talks exactly of that period. It's written by Todd Statman, and he is simply fabulous. The kind of passion he has for Hindi cinema comes across so much into this book, and there are elements in this book which I absolutely adore. He discusses movies like Rani Mera Naam and Bombay 405 Miles and Chori Mera Kaam, and movies which most casual Hindi movie viewers wouldn't have heard of. And here he is discussing about it in so much detail. And there are some elements in the book which are so brilliant. Like in one part he writes, Dharmendra is so dependable a masala hero that he could have been genetically bred for this purpose. It's superb. It's absolutely superb. This book has stuff like this throughout, filled in its pages. It has a wonderful introduction where it talks about certain specifics of Hindi cinema, like the heroes, and it discusses heroes like Amitabh Bachchan, Vinod Khanna, Dharmendra, Feroz Khan, the action stars of the 70s. And then he talks about the heroines like Zeenat Aman, Hema Malini, Parveen Babi, Rekha. And then he talks about the villains like Amjad Khan, Prem Chopra, Ajit. And it is absolutely fabulous to give this kind of an introduction, for those who are really not well versed with Hindi movies of that period. He has a section on the supporting actors, which talks of people like Helen and Keshto Mukherjee and Nirupa Roy and Shetty. It's fabulous. Where do you get a book on Hindi cinema which discusses about these people? And of course, then he talks of directors like Prakash Mehra, Manmohan Desai, KSR Das, the director from the South who made so many cult Hindi movies of the 70s. So, it's a fabulous, fascinating book on that period of Hindi cinema, the 1970s, where action and everything was larger than life, and it had this comic book feel about it. That's precisely what this book captures, that wonderful period of Hindi cinema, and it captures it beautifully. Kudos to Todd Statman for, this is truly a labor of love. It's one of the best books on Hindi cinema I've read. So these were my favorite 5 books on Hindi cinema. I'll probably do another episode, another video where I talk about 5 more favorite books from Hindi cinema. But that probably will be sometime later. But till then, do hunt for these books. Most of them, I have bought all of them from Amazon India. And I think all of them are still available from Amazon India. In case there is some book which you want to read and is not available in Amazon, you can send me a query in the comment section and I'll try and help you out with it. I hope you enjoy reading these books. Till the next time, bye for now.